watching America Trends. I'm Mary Burt-Godwin, and I'm very much looking forward to meeting our next guest and talking to him. I think everyone at home can probably relate on some level to someone in their life having cancer and being diagnosed with cancer. I, for one, have lost my dad and a sister to cancer, and I have several friends in my life that are currently being treated for cancer. And our next guest is the CEO and founder of Context Therapeutics, a drug development company that looking to advance medical medicines and therapies for female cancer specifically. Marty Lehr, welcome to America Trends.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really delighted to talk to you. And as I said in the intro, I'm sure you get this because I feel like I just want to thank you profoundly for what you do and helping further treatments and therapies for specifically women, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you focus on female cancers. But it's just something that is near and dear to me, and I think everyone has lost someone or been touched by that. So I thank you for what you do, and tell me how I was looking over your bio, you have amazing things on your resume, but what led you to start Context Therapeutics?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any one reason, and in some sense, fate settles in at some point. So for me, the ultimate, I think, reason why I did it subconsciously was breast and ovarian cancer run in my family.
Okay.
And for 10 to 15% of women who get these cancers, there's a genetic component. And so you can get something like a BRCA test to see if you're at high risk of developing these cancers. My family is actually on the other side, where we have no idea why anyone gets these cancers, and it's on both sides. But it happens at a very high rate. And so for me, it's mission driven. We want to develop drugs that can treat female cancers. So these are breast, ovarian, endometrial cancer. Endometrial cancer is cancer of the uterus. Okay. So these are the reproductive tissues.
Yes.
400,000 women are diagnosed with these cancers each year in the US. So our goal is, can we make these women live longer once they're diagnosed with these diseases and develop drugs where there's not debilitating side effects? So women can go about their daily lives. You can walk down the street and no one has any idea you're fighting this terrible battle.
So, God, I want to ask you so many things, because I know with breast cancer, let's say, my sister was, my sister and best friend at the same time were diagnosed with it. This was 2 or 3 years ago, and they both were able to, it was like a good kind, I don't know the details of that, but they were able to get treatment, and also, I think, both had lumpectomies, and maybe one had a full mastectomy on one side, but then they were able to be cancer-free pretty soon after that. But are there some female cancers that are a death sentence or don't have necessarily a high cure rate, that these kinds of therapies are going to help prolong their life, like you're saying? Yeah,
and my mother was similar in that category, where it was very fortunate, caught early, but that month period from the time of diagnosis to ultimately the surgery to confirm that it's, in your words, the good kind, that's a tough month.
Yeah.
That's a really tough month. So for cancer, generally speaking, it's a funnel. And for us, the way I think about it, you have 400,000 women diagnosed with breast, ovarian, and endometrial each year. 90% of those women, maybe even 95, if it's caught early, isolated just toward the tissue where the cancer is starting. So if it's a breast cancer, it's just a lump in the breast. If you catch it early, you remove the cancer, may or may not get chemotherapy or radiation at that point, but those women are cured.
Okay.
So that's great. The problem is when you're starting with 400,000 at the top and 5 to 10% are not cured, meaning the cancer comes back 1 to 15 years later, there are no cures at that point.
Okay.
And so once the cancer comes back, it's metastatic, meaning it's moved from that local site and
spread. That's
the spread.
Term, right.
And so the apex of the funnel is 400,000, but once you get to the yearly issue, which is there's about 50,000 deaths per year of breast, ovarian, and endometrial. And so what we're trying to do is for those patients that have no curative option right now, can we develop treatments to make them live longer and live really productive lives while they're fighting these cancers?
Okay, that was my question. So then they would be take these therapies, and right now you have ONA-XR. Am I saying that?
ONA-XR, yeah.
Okay, ONA-XR.
Yeah.
That is in phase 2 of clinical trials. And so, I have so many questions about this too. So how long from beginning of conceptualization of this drug to where you are now, and then how much more do you have to go? It's 3 or 4 phases, am I correct?
It's 3 phases, but this is in biotech and pretty much any industry, there's these great kind of stories about drugs. So actually, the drug that we're developing has been in development for almost 40 years.
Oh, wow.
With about a 30-year hiatus.
Okay.
So it was...
Is that when they shelved female cancer research and they said, now you're bringing it back?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, you pretty much nailed it.
Yeah.
So what happened was this drug was discovered in 1984 as a contraceptive. And so women were given very low doses, and it was working quite well in clinical trials.
Okay.
And then there was this belief that the drug works by blocking progesterone. And we know, based upon a study in the UK, in almost 26,000 women, they looked at long-term use of contraceptives, which were typically either supplementing women with estrogen or progesterone.
Right.
And they found this really interesting finding where women who took long-term estrogen contraceptive therapy had a 25% decreased risk of getting breast cancer, which is great. Women who took progesterone had a 25% increased risk.
Wow.
That's not so good. And so that led them down the path of maybe we should block progesterone. And so a study was done at a much higher dose of that drug. And the data was fantastic. Tumors were shrinking left and right.
Wow.
Women were doing great, but it was causing stress on the liver. And so it was shelved. That's the pharma jargon. You used it appropriately.
Hey, I got the right term,
people forgot about it. It was on a shelf somewhere.
Yeah.
And then 20 years passed, and people realized, well, sometimes when a drug has a weird effect on the liver, you might just be giving it too fast to the patient, and it causes stress in the liver, which is the main organ that processes toxins in our body.
Right.
So our whole hypothesis was we'll make a new version of the drug, which we call an extended release version.
Okay.
And by giving the same amount of drug just over a more consistent period of time, that issue would go away. And so we resuscitated the drug, took it off the shelf, made a new form factor for it, generated some new intellectual property, and now it's been in over 150 women. And that same shrinkage we saw originally in the breast cancer trials, we just reported data in endometrial cancer, where we're shrinking tumors, the tumors are staying held in check. It's really having a nice effect on women with a devastating diagnosis.
Wow, that's amazing. And so in the phase 2, you continue this, and then you go to phase 3, which is where you can then ask for FDA approval.
Yes. Oncology is a little different, right? And people, especially over the last few years, have politicized the FDA and the regulatory agencies. Oncology is totally different because it's not like taking cough medicine.
Right.
You either take this drug or theoretically you can die. And so the FDA has always been motivated to work with companies, they're referred to as sponsors, who are developing these drugs to accelerate the development of the assets. And so as long as your drug is providing the intended effect in patients with a reasonable safety profile, the FDA can be very flexible. If you show such a great effect, they may actually approve you after phase 2, in what's referred to as an accelerated pathway. So there's the typical kind of gating points for the FDA. In oncology, they can be truncated if the company shows really good data.
Well,
I don't know if we can get to that path, but we're certainly showing exciting data
trying.
in the trials.
Let me go back to a question you were talking about, the breast cancer, and I know that there's detection, early detection of women to breast exams. How does ovarian cancer and endometrial cancer present, and how does somebody even know early detection, you mentioned? So how does that even happen? It's
so hard, so hard. The breast, which is nice in that one can theoretically feel.
Yep.
So you should absolutely get a mammography as your attending physician prescribes. But you can also do self-surveillance. The problem with all of us is our abdomen has a lot of open space. And so you can feel your stomach, you can actually push around the organs a little bit. So for ovarian and endometrial, you can have very large tumors that are growing rapidly, but never feel them. And so until you're either in a standard OBGYN visit or a atypical side effect happens, something like bleeding or more frequent urination.
But then it seems like at that point, it's too late. Maybe.
Often is. So one of the reasons that a woman, to give an example, who's typically diagnosed with metastatic, so this is cancer that's spread throughout their body, breast cancer will typically live 4, 5, 6 years from that diagnosis. Ovarian, it's 12 to 18 months, and endometrial about 18.
Wow.
So, and that's if it's diagnosed late.
Yeah, and it's just been something I've been hearing about is these female-centric medical issues have been kind of underfunded or underpaid attention to, shelved, whatever the reasons are. And you hear these stats because there's other stats that I've heard of other cancers, but I haven't specifically heard that, 12 to 18 months or whatever this study.
Yeah.
It's pretty alarming. So I'm so glad you're doing this. So tell us quickly what the next step is for you, for Context Therapeutics.
So we have two products in development, ONXR, which is in phase 2 development across breast, ovarian, and endometrial cancer. We'll have a variety of updates for that program over the next couple of months and through the end of the year.
Wow.
And the idea is to show, so what's an update? An update means, are we shrinking the tumor? How long are we shrinking it? And what's the quality of life for women through that period?
So guests at home can see you at contexttherapeutics.com. Marty Lehr, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having
I love
me.
what you're doing. Thank you so much. Contexttherapeutics.com. Medicines for female cancers and other solid tumors. Everyone at home, stick around for more America Trends right after this.